The Grand Prix Drivers Association has made an official Instagram account in a bid to try and defend Verstappen's actions that have been sanctioned by the FIA, mostly revolving around the swearing incident. But with the drivers massively standing behind the three-time world champion's actions, they're now adamant that the governing body has gone in a polar extreme when it comes to sanctioning drivers for behaviours that cannot be controlled in the heat of the moment. With all this in mind, can we actually see an improvement in the drivers' behaviour, or more importantly, should we expect a change in the FIA's actions against the drivers? One of the more controversial things in the sport recently has been the behaviour of the FIA towards Verstappen, and more importantly, the actions we've seen from the Dutchman in order to aggravate the governing body. This tension started all the way back in Baku, where Verstappen used foul language to describe the behaviour of his car, to which he received a community service penalty. But a couple of weekends later, when Leclerc used the F word and apologised instantly for it, his penalty took some time and it wasn't nearly the same as Verstappen's, probably because he did apologise multiple times at the moment. Now, the situation has come to the point of the GPDA standing firmly behind Verstappen, because there are situations that we cannot just ignore as if they weren't happening. This is a man who has been vocal about the sport and a driver who's brought so much value, just like every other driver on the grid. But if you're driving at 300 kilometers per hour and a car comes ahead of you unaware that you're flying behind, the last thing that would cross your mind is to watch your language. And this is something that has been pointed out by Verstappen. Furthermore, he went on to express his anger with Ben Saliam regarding the kids question, as he said that these kids will swear nevertheless. So if their parents don't want them to pick up this habit from the sport, maybe they shouldn't broadcast the radio so frequently, or even more importantly, they shouldn't watch the sport at all. It has been reported right after the incident that the drivers have expressed their anger with the FIA in their shared WhatsApp group. But the fact that Alex Wirtz has stated that a man like Günther Steiner managed to make a figure out of himself by using this word and has been emphasised by the documentary Drive to Survive, while on the other hand, Verstappen is being penalised for using it once for describing the behaviour of the car, is definitely bizarre. This is going to raise a lot of questions as to whether or not the GPDA's Instagram activity is going to push the governing body in the right direction, especially now that the FIA themselves have responded to critics and stated that they will never get the credit for what they do, regardless of their actions and their constant activity on and off the track. Of course, all of this is having a negative impact on the F1's popularity and sponsors, as well as viewership, which is under a tremendous threat, despite the rise of the documentary Drive to Survive, which did rejuvenate the interest in the sport in America especially. This is why the GPDA creating an Instagram account is not something that should be ignored, because the account has been followed already by retired figures like Vettel, who is also likely to stand behind Verstappen in his actions, as he hasn't always been best friends with Ben Saliam, just like Hamilton, who stated that the current president of the FIA never had his respect and never will. Again, a very interesting moment happened in Mexico, where Leclerc has used the same word that landed Verstappen the community service penalty, and while apologising immediately and stating that he doesn't want to end up like his rival in terms of the FIA's policy, that didn't help him all that much. Yes, he did avoid the community service, but nevertheless, the fact that both of them used the same word and they didn't receive the same penalty goes to show that the consistency of the FIA is definitely under a big question mark. This is something that the three-time world champion found quite funny, and when talking about it to a greater extent, he said, "I can't say the word because I will probably get another penalty. Apparently it only counts for me anyway, because after the race in Mexico someone was swearing. I didn't hear anything from it, so it's better I don't swear again." According to the FIA, there has been a distinguishable difference in how the two drivers handled their respective slurs, which is the primary reason why Verstappen was fined with the community service penalty and Leclerc wasn't. When addressing this, the FIA wrote in an official statement, "It is the policy of the FIA to ensure that language used in its public forums, such as press conferences, meets generally accepted standards for all audiences and broadcasts. In particular, this is true of statements made by participants in the World Championships, and thus being role models both inside and outside the sport." The stewards received the transcript of the post-race driver's press conference in Mexico and found that Leclerc, the driver of the car 16, used language in response to a somewhat leading question asking him, "What did you say to yourself in relation to the significant moment towards the end of the race where Leclerc was fighting to control the car at the exit of the last corner?" This is why the stewards have chosen that the appropriate penalty for Leclerc would be €10,000, with 5,000 of them suspended pending no repeat within 12 months. According to Verstappen, the reason why he was penalised harsher compared to Leclerc is because of the fact that the stewards believed that in the time that the Mexico GP was broadcast, it was already too late in the evening in Europe and kids weren't watching the post-race conference, referring to Ben Salim's statement that the drivers should be role models for the kids growing up. Nevertheless, the drivers who have been the fiercest rivals of Verstappen have stood behind him and defended him vastly when it comes to this community service penalty, with Hamilton saying that it's silly and if he was in Verstappen's position, he would have never done it in the first place. To top that off, we are yet to find out what the penalty is, and this created even more confusion between the drivers. Is the FIA trying to invent penalties just to apply credibility over its drivers? And if so, are they succeeding in doing so, or are they just making themselves the laughingstock of the sport? All of this has put more shade to the FIA because now they have to deal with a lot of pressure from the Grand Prix Drivers Association, and if they become public with the influence that Russell has on the grid and with how Alex Wirtz has been quite vocal about the FIA not being consistent in their penalties, then it's certainly something that's going to spark a lot of controversy throughout the rest of the 2024 campaign as well as the beginning of 2025. Ben Salim feels like there will be a huge question mark when it comes to the FIA's influence on the sport, as they are never receiving enough credit for what they do, which quite frankly should be expected because they are a non-profit organisation, which means they shouldn't expect to be applauded for doing their job right. When talking about it, Ben said, "No, we will never get the credit. Impossible. We only get rubbish. That I know. When you look at it, everybody made money out of the FIA. Everyone except the FIA. Everyone gets the credit except the FIA. It's true, when I took over, we had a running operating cost of minus 20 million. Why? Because we have our income as everybody else." Ben Salim hasn't been the most liked man in the Formula One world, and it's very likely that situations like this, combined with the pressure of the GPDA, will affect how his position as the president of the FIA will evolve. But it's very likely that Verstappen and the company of 19 drivers standing behind him will definitely nudge the FIA in the right direction. It's no secret that the drivers have been extremely angry with the penalty that the three-time world champion received after Baku, and now that they've gone on the social media Instagram, their influence might be a lot bigger than originally anticipated. With all this in mind, do you think that Ben Salim should be changed as the president of the FIA? And more importantly, do you think that the GPDA is going to achieve something great through social media? Let us know in the comments below. And if you want to check out the latest drama revolving around Lance Stroll and his horrific performance in Aston Martin, check out the video that's appearing on your screen right now.